Good morning. I'm Bob Rohrlack with the Tampa Bay Chamber. Thank you all for being here today. This is our webinar with the Tampa Bay Chamber and our partners. Today we'll be focusing on the CARES Act and specifics you need to be prepared for as a small business working on these loans. Today we will be talking with some experts from the banking community as well as with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on information that can be useful to you. It's April 9th. At currently 11 a.m., we'll be providing the information that we know best at this point. But as you all know, things are changing rapidly. So use this as an information piece and continue to do your research and talk to your advisors along the way. This webinar is put together in cooperation with our Memorandum of Understanding partners. They are the Greater Brandon Chamber, the Greater Plant City Chamber, the Greater Riverview Chamber, the Indo-US Chamber, the North Tampa Bay Chamber, the South Tampa Chamber, the Tampa Bay LGBT Chamber, the Tampa Bay Downtown Partnership, the Uptown Chamber, the West Shore Alliance, and the Ybor Chamber. These partners help us get the word out to our small business community on the resources available. And we thank them all for their participation and partnership as we all work together to support the economy here in Tampa Bay. Now, before I introduce our panelists, if there are any media attendees in this webinar, we want you to note that our panelists are here to give some insight to the business community and would prefer not to be quoted from conversations in today's webinar. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask them regarding the CARES Act, please contact them directly. Today's event has 4 panelists that I would like to introduce. The first is Allison Dembeck from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Allison is the Executive Director in the Congressional and Public Affairs Division at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She's focusing on education, labor, workforce development, and issues related to those topics. Next is Bill Goede. Bill is the Bank of America's Tampa Bay Market President. He is also the Business Banking Market Executive for the Greater Tampa Bay Market. Next is Hallmark of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Moore is the Executive Director for the Southeast region for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Moore oversees the congressional and public affairs for 8 southeastern states, including Florida. Next, we have Rita Lowman. Rita is the President of Pilot Bank. She has over 40 years of banking and has blazed trails for the industry throughout her career. And so we want to thank our panelists for their time here today. We know all of you are very busy, and we appreciate you joining us to talk to the businesses in Tampa Bay. Let's get right to the questions. First one for our banking representatives. Bill and Rita, I know you both are very, very busy working with your clients. We appreciate your time. Do you have any updates from last week that you'd like to share with our viewers? Rita, can you go first?
I'll be glad to. First of all, we want to thank all of those that are listening who have been contacting their banks because, again, that's the way to get started. I want you to know that all of your bankers have taken thousands of applications, and we as a bank began funding yesterday. We really appreciate what the SBA is doing, but I do also like to share, as I did last week, that it's not an overnight process. Bill, you need, and Bill and I know we talk about this all the time, you need to end up making sure you have all of your information, you're talking to your banker, and then you submit the application with what's needed. And then once it goes through underwriting, the turnaround time is relatively quick. I don't want to say it's the next day, but there is a time frame of us being able to get those funded for you. So again, the process is moving as quickly as we can hope it would move. And again, we're very thankful for the Treasury for identifying and sharing with us some of the details that were not worked out last week when we were talking, Bob.
Good, very good, thank you. Bill, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think I just build on the same thing that Rita said, is that if you think about, you have 4 basic areas. You have the application process, you have verification of the information, you have an approval and a funding. I think the majority, as Rita said, the applications, there have been a lot of them, which is, talks to the need for this program, which is out there, and some have started funding. As Rita mentioned, the majority still are in the verification approval piece. The bank's processes are each bank has a slightly different process. You need to be checking with your institution. You will be getting messages back and forth one way or another with questions or information that is needed. Be looking for that, because there is a timeliness in providing the information quickly that may be missing from the initial application. Is important to keep that process going.
Very good. So the best scenario when a client, small business, comes to your institution and says, I need this, I want to apply, what should they have already gathered from their business? What information should they have ready to put in front of you and talk to you about? What would be a quick list of things you'd want them to have? Bill or Rita?
Well, go ahead, Bill, and then I'll add to.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, last week we directed everybody to the Tampa Bay Chamber website for the information and the links to the Treasury and the SBA. Although they have, it constantly is updating and there's slight tweaks to it, it all remains consistent with being able to provide the payroll information and the payroll expenses, because that's what this initial loan is being based off of. So having that information and being able to document how you arrived at the number you were applying for is the important piece of it. And that, although, again, you continue to see updates from the SBA, that part really hasn't changed in terms of that and anything that how you arrived at the number and being able to support with documentation how you arrived at the number that you're applying for is the important part.
And one of the other things, as Bill's talking about, is that your banker may ask you for an additional piece of information, or your supporting document does not necessarily meet what you're requesting. And so they may ask you to redo that. And again, that's for your benefit. So make sure that you're continuing that correspondence and that open dialogue, and don't feel like that just because you've sent everything in, that's the last time until you receive the check that you're going to receive information or dialogue with the bank. It's going to be ongoing, Bob.
Good, thank you. And I also want to stress to businesses that they remember Congress passed this legislation very quickly to be able to support small businesses around the country. A very big bill, over 800 pages. That's a lot to go through. There were a lot of government agencies involved in all the different legislative points. So the federal government had to figure that out. And then they had to work with our banking community so they would understand what they need to do, and they had to put their processes together. This has moved incredibly fast. So patience and gathering your information is a key for small business to be able to get into the process and hopefully be able to receive some support through these programs. So Bill and Rita, I know you both are very busy working on applications that we're talking about today. Any last words of advice before we let you two go to approve more loans?
My last piece of advice, again, is as Bill and I've talked about, many people have already applied, but make sure that you are going to your bank because they know you. They're able to do business with, you've been able to do business with them in the past, and they're going to be the ones being able to help you the quickest. Now, it doesn't mean that other banks aren't taking some referrals, but again, you're going to get the best service from the bank that you currently bank with. Good
advice. Bill, anything else?
Yeah, I would just say two things. One, Bob, you already talked about it. Be patient. Again, we all the banks, we are working very, very hard to get this money out to the businesses that need it most. And it is a process. It is a new process for all of us. There is nobody who's an expert in this. We're all learning at the same pace, and so be patient. I know that's hard to do, but be patient and have that communication. And the last one I would say is be careful. And that's tied to the be patient piece. Be careful of the phishing emails that are going out. We talked about this last week. Be very careful of who is sending you information saying, give us your information, give us your secret information, your private information, and we can help you. You need to be getting that, corresponding that with your financial institution. So I know that, everybody wants the money, and that falls in the be patient piece, but when you're sometimes lose sight of that, you end up clicking on things and providing information that you would wish you probably had not provided.
That's true.
Right. Good point. Let me ask two quick questions if you can give us short answers to these. Can you clarify whether a U.S. company with 50% ownership by a foreign business is eligible for the PPP? Is that check with your banker question? Or Allison, you're nodding. Do you think they are eligible?
They are eligible. There was some confusion about this at the beginning because the draft application had a citizenship requirement, and so there's been confusion about this. At this point, there is no citizenship requirement to apply for the PPP.
Very good, thank you. And for Rita and Bill, this is a question that came in. What are my options for obtaining a PPP loan if my financial institution is not an SBA qualified lender? They say banks haven't been willing to take their application because they're not account holders there. What's an option for somebody in that situation?
Well, I'll go ahead and share that. There are some community banks that are taking non-account holders, helping them because this is something that we're trying to do. Again, the list is quite long, so you have to be patient and know that it's not going to happen again overnight. But I do feel like a number of community banks are taking those. And then there's going to be some other non-banks resources out there that are trying to get approved too. But in saying that, all of your banks have not necessarily gotten their approval yet for SBA. And so you have to be patient, realizing that there's some banks that if you were not already an SBA lender, that are receiving their approvals this week. So your bank may very well still be in the approvals process and will be able to take your application.
Okay, so go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think, again, back to the, directing you back to the Tampa Bay Chamber website and the links to the SBA, they are constantly updating that list and that link with the approved SBA lenders. And so that's one to go back and look at because it's constantly being updated and refreshed. And
so for those watching the webinar, the website Bill has been referring to is tampabaychamber.com. That's tampabaychamber.com. And we have a link to the COVID-19 situation and all the resources available, and you can find it there. Thank you, Bill. Well, Bill and Rita, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for your time, both last week and this week, to help our community understand what's going on with the federal legislation and how they can access resources. Both of you have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to jump right into the questions for Allison and Moore. Thank you both for being here. We have a lot of questions. We'll try to get through them as best we can, but please feel free to jump in on any of them. Our first question, what are the differences between the Payroll Protection Program and the Economic Injury and Disaster Loans? Can you give us a quick oversight on that?
Let me first of all just say, Bob and Jacqueline and everyone, thank you for your participation and inviting us to participate in this call today and all the regional chambers in that area. I'm going to kind of defer a lot of stuff over to Allison, but I'll just jump in and then let her add this on this one. But the PPP loans are being issued solely through your banking lenders. Again, you can find those on your website where your qualified lenders are. Others are being added, but the SBA.gov, there's a finder, a lender finder on their website to help find those. And then the EIDL loans are being issued through the SBA themselves. They are largely for the same expenses, but the PPP loans are required really only for four things: payroll cost, utilities, rent, and interest on your mortgages. And the EIDL loans are for the same things, although there are additional things that you can use those loans for, such as anything that was a disruption in your supply chain and other things as well. I'm going to kind of turn it over to Allison to add anything that I may have missed in that, but kind of answer that as well.
I think that those are right. Those are the big things. The EIDL loans, you can use it for more COVID-19 related stuff, and then the forgiveness aspect of it.
Very good, thank you. And I should have introduced this section by letting everyone know that we work very closely with the U.S. Chamber on many issues affecting workforce and general commerce. They focus on the national level, we focus on the regional level, but it's a strong partnership working with the Chamber that all of the chambers participating in the webinar work with the Chamber. So I should have mentioned that, but thank you all again for being here. Next question, can a small business receive both the PPP loan and the EIDL loan? Allison?
The short answer to that is yes, but the caveat goes back to what Moore mentioned. Yes, you can receive both loans. However, you have to use the money for different things. So since, for example, 75% of the PPP has to go towards payroll, you really should think about using the EIDL loans for, disruption in the supply chain or not being able to meet other financial obligations because of revenue loss or that sort of thing. So you just want to be careful not to have any overlap. I'll also say that if you have both, the EIDL loans come with that up to $10,000 of emergency grant funding, within 3 days of the loan's origination. If you also have a PPP loan, that money, whatever that amount is, up to $10,000, that actually gets counted in your forgiveness part of the PPP loan.
Okay, all right, good. Now this question is near and dear to my heart. We understand that 501c3 and other nonprofits are eligible for the PPP loans. However, 501c6 organizations, your local Chamber of Commerce, are not. We have heard that the next round of funding is still not going to include 501c6 organizations. Have you heard anything? Do you anticipate any changes to that from federal legislation?
We're working on this really hard. Where the U.S. Chamber appreciates everybody's support. We tried to get we did. We got a letter up to the Hill right before the bill passed to try to encourage it to be included the first time, the language to be included the first time. We've been asked now to provide very specific language on what it is we would need to see and what it would look like. So we're working through this on how to address the issue. And at this point, the big, just kind of probably going a little deeper into it, but the big issue is trying to figure out how do you deal with the lobbying issues and maybe, looking at organizations that really are lobbying organizations and C6 organizations and excluding them, but allowing state and local chambers, for example. And so we're still playing with what that language might look like so we can address the concerns that members of Congress have while also being able to address the concerns of our state and local chambers. And so keep your eye out. I think that there's going to be another letter coming around soon from the U.S. Chamber so that we can have we had a large showing to begin with. It was in the history of, and Moore can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think in the history of sign-on letters, that was the quickest turnaround with the most number of signatures that we've ever had on that C6 issue. So we're hoping to add even more signatures for our next letter up.
Perfect, good. I know, go ahead, Moore.
I'm sorry, Bob. I was just going to say, and I'll add to that in a sense. Allison is right. We had, in less than 3 hours, we had more than 1,400 state and local chambers and trade associations sign onto that letter. We are, as she said, we're working on it very hard. I think as there was some question as with McConnell and the administration coming out earlier this week saying they were going to try to provide additional funding for PPP loans this week. The Senate thus far has not been able to agree to that yet. Today, they've already started the debate and trying to do that today. It hasn't happened yet.
It failed. The vote failed.
Right, okay. So far. So there was a question or an ask, would it be possible to get the 501c6s included in this part today or this week because of that? And no, our push is just really to get more funding in there, and let's debate and discuss other provisions like 501c6s and others in another phase. The question is, when does Congress come back in and start debating another phase 4 bill and stuff? And that's part of the question as well. But yes, we're continuing to push on it very hard, and we'll continue to do so. And there'll be additional opportunities for local and state chambers to join us in our efforts. But in the meantime, I'd encourage you to contact your members of Congress as well on behalf of your own organizations and encourage them to begin considering this, and then strongly encourage them to add it the next bill.
Good. And we have already been speaking with our congressional delegation about the importance of support for C6, and thank you for your leadership on that. Even though 501c6 organizations can't participate in the PPP program, can the chamber or a trade association use anything else in the CARES Act, like the EIDL loans?
Yes, so there's a couple of options. There are a number of those other tax provisions that were in the in the CARES Act, it's the employer payroll tax deferment. So you can defer this year's payroll taxes. 50% would then be due December 31st, 2021, with the second half being due December 31st, 2022. So 501c6s can take, and trade associations can take advantage of that. There's also the employee retention credit. So if operations have partially or fully suspended because of COVID-19, or if there's been more than a 50% decline in gross receipts in a quarter, those organizations would then be eligible for a 50% tax credit for the first $10,000 in compensation, and that would include compensation including healthcare benefits, and that's per employee. So there's that. And then you also mentioned the EIDL loans. I know some folks have been having trouble with SBA and getting approved for the EIDL loans as a C6 organization, but our understanding is that yes, chambers are eligible.
Okay, terrific. A question that's come in since we've been on the webinar: if a business is refused the $10,000 grant, will they receive notification they have been turned down, or will they just not get a positive response?
Oh, you'll know everything at the same time. So you'll know about the 10,000 grant, and at this point, the way SBA has been talking about it, you'll know about the 10,000 grant and start talking through the loan and how much your loan amount will be all at the same time. Okay, good.
So the key: stay in touch with your financial institution, the SBA, and keep asking how things are going.
Yes.
Our next question switches and looks more at larger employers. How does the CARES Act help large employers, those with more than 500 employees?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, there's those tax provisions, and there's a number of other tax provisions in there that would help the mid-size and large-size employers. There was also $500 billion in the CARES Act for loans and loan subsidies and support for Federal Reserve credit facilities in there. And some of it is for specific industries. So there was $25 billion for air carriers and ticket agents and air maintenance. There was $4 billion for air cargo carriers, and then there was $17 billion specifically for businesses critical to national security. And the remaining $454 billion was set aside for businesses and for states and municipalities. Now, there are some restrictions on using those loans, restrictions on stock buybacks and executive compensation, limits for when you can increase salaries on your most highly compensated employees, but there are loans available for mid and large size employers now.
Okay. Talk to your financial institution. We've been beating that drum through every webinar. Talk to them and bring as much documentation as you can to your discussions. And just for clarification, someone asked us, did they hear correctly that the PPP application, they can include their rent and utility payments in their calculations? Yes.
Correct. That's exactly what PPP is for.
You can go to tampabaychamber.com, and we've got links to the U.S. Chamber that they explain in detail more these into the programs, as well as on our website as well. So good question. Okay, now our next question, which employers have to pay their employees for sick or FMLA leave, and what are the requirements for using those leave options? I know there's been some legislation involving that as well.
Yes. So the phase 2 legislation that Congress passed put some mandatory paid sick leave and paid FMLA leave specifically related to COVID-19. So if you are an employer with fewer than 500 employees, you have to give your full-time employees 10 days of sick leave. If they're part-time employees, it's based on the amount that they would work over an average of 2-week period. And that's starting April 1st. So that's in effect. Now that paid leave, both the paid sick leave and the paid FMLA leave, is 100% tax refundable. And the way it works is that employers can actually keep the money that they would have deposited for payroll taxes on that paid leave in anticipation of what the refund was. self-employed and sole proprietors and independent contractors are eligible for that tax credit. But it's important to remember that everything really is COVID specific, COVID-19 specific. So it's about being subject to a quarantine or having a diagnosis or your child being out of school. The FMLA leave is only for individuals who are staying home to take care of a child whose school or daycare is closed, and that's a 10-week paid leave at 2/3 of the regular rate. I'll also add that the sick leave requirements are in addition to anything that you already offer your employees.
Allison, I don't know how you read that 800-page document, but you obviously went through the whole thing. Can you talk a little bit more about the independent contractors and what they're eligible for? Because that's a large part of the economy these days.
Sure. So independent contractors are pretty much eligible for everything. If you're an independent contractor, so if you employ independent contractors and you're applying for the PPP or the EIDL loans, you should not be including those employees in your salary count, and you should not be continuing to pay them salary. And the reason for that is because the independent contractors are eligible to apply for the PPP and the EIDL loans on their own. So we're essentially trying to make sure that you can't double dip, right? The idea is to keep people paid, not to pay them twice. So independent contractors can participate in both the PPP and in the EIDL loans. They also, as I mentioned, can take the tax credits for the paid sick leave and the paid FMLA leave if they want to do that. And the reality is under the expanded UI benefits, because there's also expanded UI benefits that was put in place on the CARES Act. That's an extra 13 weeks of UI. It's an extra $600 per week per employee, and obviously it's specifically COVID-19 related. So not being able to work or working fewer hours because of COVID-19 and not being able to telework is part of it. However, independent contractors are also eligible for the UI benefits.
Okay, good. Another question. If a company was required to close because of the stay-at-home order by the state, do they still have to pay the sick leave to their employees?
So if you are trying to have the PPP loan or take advantage of the employer retention credit, then yes, you still have to pay the sick leave. If you're furloughing those employees because you're not able to keep your business open, then no, you don't, and those employees would be eligible for UI. Okay.
So there's a reaction one way or the other that impacts that they need to make sure they're talking to counsel and getting the right advice specifically to their issue.
And it's important, and I think it was Rita mentioned it at the beginning, the whole purpose of these loans, right? Both the PPP and the EIDL loans is to make sure that both businesses are able to stay alive and can come back, when we return to whatever our new normal is going to be, that they can be open, but also so that employees can continue to stay on payroll, continue to be on their healthcare benefits and all of that. So even if the business itself isn't able to function, that's the whole purpose of these loans, is that everybody can still have their paycheck and have their healthcare benefits, and in this case also have their paid sick or paid FMLA leave.
Okay. So make sure you're talking to your accountants, your bankers, your attorneys, and getting the right direction as you go through, because each business has specific, unique characteristics to take a look at. Next question, how do the CARES Act unemployment insurance provisions fit into the puzzle of small business programs and paid leave requirements?
Well, so that is kind of what we were just talking about, right? So, and an individual who is getting paid sick or paid family leave is not going to be eligible for UI because they're getting paid. Even if in that case they've had reduced hours, they're not eligible for the UI. So it does, you do have to have the conversations of, are you furloughing your employees? Are you keeping people on and taking advantage of PPP or in the EIDLs?
Okay. If a business has submitted 2 EIDL applications, how long does it take to hear back from the SBA on these? Yeah, are there any averages are being talked about?
So the applications, this is kind of folks are just starting to hear back, right? So the applications, and I think I don't remember who mentioned it, which it might have been Rita. Just everybody's still trying to figure out all of the different rules and all of the, all of these, and the rules keep changing just a little bit. We're trying to catch up. It's one of our coworkers describes this as you're trying to build an airplane as it's taking off. So it's just very difficult. But the answer, that's a long answer. The way of saying is, yesterday I started hearing that people are now hearing from SBA about having been approved for EIDL loans. That doesn't mean that the loan itself is actually originated yet, that it doesn't mean that money is there, that it's happening. I think that's still, you still have another few days before that starts happening. But the money is now going, getting ready to go out the door. The money is there, and we should start seeing some movement soon. It just, there has to also be some back and forth where the applications, at least in terms of the PPP stuff, right? Everything was going through the banks. The banks then have to send everything to SBA. SBA is going through their stuff, and then money has to get back to the bank. So there is also a little bit of lag time once, once the banks have even been able to approve the loans. So,
and keep in mind, as we said at the beginning of today's webinar, this is April 9th. It's not noon yet today. We're less than a week into these programs being available. This time last week, we were talking about what we anticipated was about to happen. Now it's been less than a week, and some are already starting to hear back on the status of their applications. That's good in normal times. That's incredible in these current times. So patience, as we keep hearing, is the key to this process. Be in for the long run. We understand it's stressful times, but patience and gather your information is vitally important.
I'll remind
go ahead,
you,
Moore.
well, just last Friday, the 3rd, is when small businesses and sole proprietors could even apply for the PPP loans. And it's this Friday, the 10th, that independent contractors and self-employed. So there's that log jam and backlog a little bit already. And then you've got this next wave of applicants that are going to be coming through beginning this Friday and stuff as well. So just a heads up and a reminder of that as well.
So when you say that, if an LLC, they're getting ready to be applying now, their time is coming up in the wave?
That begins on Friday, yes.
Okay, so if you're an LLC business watching the webinar, definitely be talking to your attorney and banker now, because we're less than 24 hours away from the window opening for your applications. And the sooner you're in, the sooner you can get some information. So that's important. Now, another question, can a business furlough employees but still apply for the PPP?
So depends on when you furlough them. If you have furloughed them between February 15th and April 30th, you have to bring them back full-time by June 30th. And as long as you do that, then you're still eligible for the loan forgiveness. If you furlough your employees after April 30th, but before June 30th, then at that point, then your employees, your loan forgiveness then ends up being reduced proportionately to the amount that you have reduced your staff. So it goes back to this whole idea of trying to keep everybody on payroll, trying to keep everybody's health benefits intact, and trying to keep businesses ready to get up and running as soon as as soon as we're able to get up and running.
And Allison, just a real quick clarification, is it April 30th or April 26th that they have?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's April 26th. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. The specifics for each unique element into these programs can twist things and make them a little different. So where does someone go to get a paper application to mail it in? Is it talk to a financial institution, or is there a federal government website?
So the application is online.
It's electronic.
It's electronic. I would talk to your lender. I don't know how much they're doing in terms of paper applications.
It's probably better to stick with their electronic. It's faster in the system and to go with that. Okay. This next question pertains to restaurant. As we all know, the hospitality industry was hit suddenly and first. And we've been working hard with our other chambers and associations to remind everybody that restaurants are open. They are doing takeout, curbside. Please patronize the restaurants that you enjoy in the community. But if as a restaurant, someone had to furlough their employees, will they still be eligible for loan forgiveness under the PPP if they rehire everyone by June 30th? And I think you said yes with that window. Will they need to repay them for the months they were closed, or is it simply rehiring them by that date, securing the loan forgiveness?
It's simply about putting them back on payroll. It's not about back pay.
Okay. So good answer. So again, the hospitality industry probably hit the hardest throughout the country. And I encourage everyone on this webinar, contact your favorite restaurant, ask them what the menu is, order something for pickup, and support them, particularly in this long holiday weekend. Go ahead, Allison.
Just a point about the hospitality industry in particular, because I know that this might also apply to some of your folks. The 500 cap for accommodation and food sector businesses is a little different in that it's not 500 employees overall. It's 500 as long as you have fewer than 500 employees at each location. So that's just a really important note because that isn't true in other sectors, but it is true it is true for hotel and food industry.
So a hotel or a restaurant, each location needs to have under 500 employees, not
correct
the aggregate.
Correct.
Good to know.
So they could apply for the PPP as long as each location is under 500.
Okay. All right. Good. Any other information or pointers you'd like to inform our viewers on here as we start to wrap up? You've given tremendous amount of information. We greatly appreciate it. Anything else?
I'll defer to you more. Is there anything? I think I've got everything kind of in my notes.
Yeah, no, Allison, thank you. And let me just kind of remind Bob, we're real fortunate to have Allison on the call. You can tell she's about as close as an expert as we have, and is doing probably 50 of these briefings over the last 3 weeks, just herself alone, in partnership and tag teaming with other regional folks that I work with as well. She's been very good with her time. I'm grateful for her time today as well. I would just simply say, though, thanks, Bob, for your leadership in the Tampa Chamber and the rest of the chambers in your region. You guys are on the front lines working with your members on a daily basis. You're hearing some horrible stories and the difficulty that they're having. I would echo what Rita and the other banking folks said. Be patient. As Tom Sullivan and Allison referred to a little while ago, they're building the plane as it's taking off and it's in the air. So I strongly encourage patience as best you can. While we've been busy doing these briefings, like I said, with Allison doing so many and myself and others, we're going to be starting another phase of briefings coming up in the next few weeks. A lot of people have got a pretty good grasp of what the CARES Act does now. Now it's largely in the hands of the lenders and trying to get that money out the door and into them, and so that they can keep their doors open and bring their employees back on or keep them employed over the next several weeks. But we also have to look at what's next. When do we start reopening our businesses? What does that look like? So there's a number of those type of questions on when and how and what do employees are required to maintain social distancing and making sure employees are safe, and then what's the legislative agenda look like going forward. And so those are questions that we're talking about internally at the Chamber, talking with our leadership and members around the country and trying to take that best advice. And then we're going to start talking about those things over the next few weeks And this will be another opportunity maybe to come on with this group and then talk about what the future looks like and how businesses need to prepare for when the doors are opened again and their businesses are operating a little bit more normal again. Although I'm not quite sure we'll be at fully normal as we were prior to this, but in a new normal, but does include going back to work and how employees will work and safety and health and all that kind of stuff being taken into consideration. So I encourage you to be patient with the lenders now. Stay vigilant, stay strong, stay healthy. We appreciate your partnership, your leadership, and all that you do for us. And just thanks a lot.
Well, we greatly appreciate the partnership we have with you all at the U.S. Chamber. You know, for our viewers, the U.S. Chamber is a block away from the White House and is hands-on with all of our national leaders as they're working through these issues and any issues that impact and affect business and workforce. And we count on them to work closely with us. And, you know, you always have an opportunity to speak to the businesses in Tampa Bay here. So we thank you for that. A lot of information, all of the chambers working with us. We greatly appreciate their participation in getting this information out to their members, along with our business associations, including the Tampa Bay EDC that works not just to recruit business, but keep business here in Tampa Bay. So thank you, both Allison and Moore, for your time. And thank Bill and Rita, who were with us earlier. Thank everybody for viewing this. Please remember to be safe. Take the precautions we're being advised to take. Do frequent a restaurant with pickup. It's a great way to keep your favorite eatery going and support those that are on the front lines. Support all of our medical caregivers and first responders who are working hard to protect us through this time. Thank you all. Enjoy the long weekend coming up. We appreciate everybody viewing, and go to tampabaychamber.com for more information. Thank you all very much.